Some horror movies still give us a final survivor, a last escape, a thin piece of comfort. The door closes, the sun comes up, someone gets away. Even if almost everyone else is gone, we are allowed to believe that something survived the nightmare. And something does. But it isn't the something we were rooting for. The monster wins. And once that happens, the fear changes. Because now the ending is not simply asking us to imagine what it would be like to face the monster. It is asking what happens when facing it does not matter, when courage is not enough, when knowing the rules is not enough, when running, fighting, hiding, or understanding the thing hunting you still does not save you. The monster remains. And that takes away one of the quiet promises horror usually gives us. And that eventually, somehow, order will return. Sometimes it does not. Sometimes the last thing standing is the thing we were afraid of. And that may be one of horror's most unsettling victories. Most horror begins on an unfair playing field. The monster is stronger. The killer knows something we don't. The supernatural doesn't follow ordinary rules. But we still expect the characters to find something, a weakness, a weapon, a way out. Because underneath the fear, we are waiting for the story to prove that the nightmare can be survived, even if survival costs almost everything. But when the monster wins, that reassurance disappears. The story closes without repairing what was broken. And suddenly, the monster feels larger than the movie. It feels like something that could continue. Hunting, replacing, waiting, spreading. That is why these endings can feel heavier than a simple death scene. Death ends something. A monster winning suggests that the horror gets to continue after the story stops. And that is a very different kind of fear. Jeepers Creepers understand something particularly cruel about monsters. Sometimes being noticed is enough. Once the creeper chooses someone, the movie begins to feel less like an escape story and more like a countdown. There are roads, cars, places to run, people who try to help, but underneath all of it is the growing sense that distance is not protection. The creature does not feel hurried. That is what makes it worse. It hunts with the confidence of something that expects to get what it came for. And by the end, that confidence feels earned. The road could not save them. Other people could not save them. Knowing more about the creature could not create a way out. The monster chose, and eventually the monster collected. We are all led to believe that knowledge gives us power, that once we understand what is hunting us, our chances improve. But sometimes understanding only tells us how little control we have. And Jeepers Creepers makes that victory feel intimate. That is not the destruction of a city. It is one predator getting exactly what it wanted. The monster does not need to destroy everything. It only needs to win this time. And we know it intends to do it again. But a monster does not always have to drag someone away to win. Sometimes it only has to destroy our ability to trust what we are seeing. That is where the thing becomes something different. A small group, an enormous frozen landscape, no easy escape, and something among them that can imitate what it consumes. The question stops being, where is the monster? And becomes, who is still human? Once suspicion becomes part of the threat, every relationship becomes dangerous. A familiar face stops being comforting. A voice you recognize becomes meaningless. Even proof begins to feel temporary. The monster does not just attack bodies, it attacks certainty. And by the ending, certainty is almost completely gone. Can either of them trust the other? Can we? And if we cannot answer that, what would victory even look like? The monster has already changed the conditions of survival. No trust, no safety, no certainty. And even if the creature has been stopped, the fear it created is still sitting there in the cold. What is scarier, watching the monster win, or realizing you may never know if it already has? Sometimes horror does not win by showing us the answer. Sometimes it wins by making the answer impossible to trust. Fallen gives us a different kind of monster victory. Not strength, not confusion. This one is about being outplayed. The frightening thing about Azazel is not simply that it is powerful. It is patient. It understands the rules. And it understands how people will try to use those rules against it. Usually, knowledge is supposed to give us an advantage. Learn what the monster is. Learn what it can do. Learn what it cannot do. Then use that knowledge to survive. But Fallen turns that expectation against us. The more the characters understand, the more the story feels like a game Azazel has already played before. And it knows the board better. For a moment, it feels like the trap worked. Like the rules finally mattered. Like evil was cornered. And then the movie reveals something worse. Azazel had one more move. That is the horror of being outplayed. Not losing because you were careless. Not losing because you did not understand. Losing after you understood. After you planned. After you believed you had finally created a situation the monster could not escape. Because it does not just take away hope. It makes your best idea part of the monster's victory. Azazel does not need to rush. It can wait. It can adapt. The monster wins because time belongs to it in a way it never belongs to us. That is why time is on our side feels so perfect. It is almost a statement of power. The humans have urgency. Azazel has patience. And when one side can afford to wait forever, even a good plan begins to feel temporary. The monster does not win because nobody fought back. It wins because fighting back was never enough. By the time we realize that, the game is over. These monsters win in very different ways. The creeper gets what it came for. The thing makes trust almost impossible. Azazel understands the game better than the people trying to beat it. But underneath those differences is the same loss, possibility. Most horror gives us possibilities. Maybe there is another door. Maybe someone heard the scream. Maybe the creature has a weakness. Maybe Dawn changes something. Monster Wins endings remove those possibilities one by one. The road closes. The weapon fails. The person beside you becomes suspicious. The place you are trying to reach is no safer than the place you left. Eventually, there is nowhere else to place hope. Fear contains possibility. You can be afraid and keep moving. Defeat feels different. Defeat is when movement stops mattering. And Monster Win horror forces us to sit with that feeling. A conventional survival ending gives the mind somewhere to settle. The danger happened. The survivor escaped. They made it out. Monster Win endings refuse that boundary. The creature is still out there. The infection is still spreading. The person we were hoping for is gone. The horror will continue. And we take that unfinished feeling home. That may be why these endings sometimes bother us more than endings with far more violence. The violence is over. The idea is not. The strongest monster victories make us wonder whether anything the characters did could ever have changed the outcome. And then we stop thinking about them. We begin thinking about ourselves. Would I have noticed something sooner? Would I have trusted the wrong person? Would I have run in the wrong direction? Would I have done anything that mattered? There is no comforting answer. That is the point. One of the strangest things about these endings is how quiet they can become. The chase ends. The screaming stops. The struggle is finished. And the monster is still there. That stillness can be more frightening than the attack itself. During an attack, the characters still run, fight, react. Afterward, the result has already been decided. That is why an empty road can become disturbing. A silent room, a deserted station, a familiar face carrying something that should have died. Sometimes the most unsettling image in horror is not the monster killing someone. It is the monster standing in a world where there is nobody left to stop it. That is victory stripped down to its simplest form. No celebration, no triumph, just continuation. The monster gets tomorrow, and the people it defeated do not. And yet we keep watching them. Why return to stories that refuse to comfort us? Maybe because horror gives us a soft place to look at something we normally try not to think about. Effort does not always guarantee success. Knowing the danger does not always mean controlling it. Sometimes bad things do not receive the ending they deserve. Horror gives those ideas claws, teeth, a familiar face that suddenly feels wrong, a creature waiting beside an empty road. And it lets us confront them from the safety of the other side of the screen. Maybe that is why Monster One endings linger. They violate one of storytelling's oldest comforts, the belief that surviving long enough means you have earned the ending. Sometimes you do not. Sometimes the hero loses. Sometimes the world changes before anyone can stop it. Sometimes the monster simply gets what it came for. And perhaps the most unsettling part is not watching the monster win. It is realizing how quickly a horror story can convince us that it was always going to. What horror movie left you with the feeling that the monster truly won? This is the Quiet Unease. Stay safe. Until we meet again.